Hello, everyone. Welcome to the TopCyberPro podcast. I'm founder and CEO Jim West. I have a wonderful guest today. I always have wonderful guests because these guests have lots of experiences, lots of great titles, wear multiple hats, and this guest is no exception to the rule. I'm just going to start naming just a few of the titles and hats that this gentleman wears. He's an author. He's a podcast host. He is a security behavior alchemist. You don't often see that as a title. And one of my favorite titles that he has is a deceptionologist. So we got a lot to talk about. So without further ado, welcome to the podcast, Mr. Perry Carpenter.
Thanks so much for having me. Honored to be here. Thanks.
So your profile is super impressive, and one of the things I saw in here that you know a lot about magic. So let's dive right into how does magic apply to cybersecurity?
Yeah, so I think that there's tons of like through lines there, and I'll start off and say like I grew up as a magic geek, so I was one of these kids that walked around with like five or six decks of cards, both like real and gaffed cards that would allow me to do different things, and yeah, kind of the typical magician kid that is like really annoying that's wanting to stop people and show them a trick, and then you realize later on it's like nobody actually wants that. Um so then I started to like shift my perspective on magic into more mentalism and psychological illusion, which feels a lot like you're a lot less like you're dealing with props and more like you're dealing with people's minds and their decisions and their intuition, which works a lot better. But either way, whether you're talking about a traditional magic trick, like where you put something in one hand and then you release that hand and something's not there that you would expect to be there, or if you're plucking a thought, seemingly plucking a thought from somebody's mind, there's always a deception at play. And in general, that deception maps into many of the social engineering principles that
I
are
was about to
there
say it's
about the
perfect for
yeah
social
about
engineering. Yeah.
exactly. Everything is always about challenging the things that people think are real, the things that they think that they're prepared for, the way that they think that they can manage their own attention, expectations, beliefs, or actions. And somebody that understands the fundamentals of magic or misdirection or all of that has, I think, an upper hand on understanding the way that cons and scams and social engineering work.
I love that. And that's what social engineering and that's like one of the fundamental things that still is well alive and well today. The MGM
Right.
data breach and hack that happened a couple years ago was just social engineering through targeted LinkedIn profiles of,
Yeah.
privileged users and admins of the MGM the IT support team. One of your big day jobs is working for Know Before, and so
Mhm.
let's talk about what is Know Before and what is their mission and what are they trying to do in cybersecurity?
Yeah, so Know Before has been around for about 15 years now and really started off focusing on the central problem of the fact that regardless of how good your antivirus is, your secure email gateway, your endpoint protection platforms, application sandboxing, all of that, regardless of how good that is, there is still a way that an attacker can get into your organization. And you mentioned the MGM breach,
Hmm.
very similar to that, right? That is a savvy human doing a little bit of research, calling somebody up, gaining their trust quickly, and then help and essentially convincing that person into resetting the password for an account that they may know. So all of that bypasses a lot of the things that we put technical controls in for. Now, you could put additional technical controls and you could put process controls and things like that, but sometimes you only realize that after the attackers figured that way in. And so Know Before really exists at the forefront of its mission to really help prepare humans for the onslaught of attacks that are aimed at them. Because what we've seen over the past few decades is that the technology is actually pretty good. I mean, when you think
Hmm.
about standard technology that is defending an organization, it is getting increasingly difficult to just brute force bypass that stuff or to hack it. I mean, maybe if you're a nation state, you've got a 0 day, but then you have to ask, am I willing to burn this 0 day for this specific
One
target
one
or this
shot, yeah.
specific objective? Or should I just try to call up Bob in accounting and trick Bob into doing something? And so the when you think about the attack surface being that every human that works in an organization is a potential node within an attack surface, and that there is going to literally be a group of people generally within organizations that that have some level of access into systems that there's not enough process or technology control into. If I can start to figure that out as an attacker, then it's probably going to be faster, easier, and cheaper for me to go that route than it is to burn the 0 day. And so Know Before exists to help prepare that to make that line of defense, that human line of defense, much, much stronger.
One of the ways I've explained it to a lot of organizations, and I got 35 years in and of experience, and one of the
Yeah.
funny ways when people talk about, just as you mentioned earlier about, you could have firewalls, you can have all these CM tools for response and detection, you can have millions of dollars spent in this, what we call defense in depth, or this layered
Yep.
strategy to kind of raise that complexity and create the challenges for the hacker to go through all these hoops to try to go through all of these network security, boundary security, endpoint security, and security, right? But at the end of the day, it's
Right.
people, right? And we have to have people still. The machines haven't replaced all of us,
Yep.
and still, I believe, even though some jobs might get taken by AI and robotics, I still think we still need people to support those systems and so on and so
Yeah.
forth. So, and that's another discussion. But the bottom line is, it still takes people to do operations to enable a business to be profitable. And at the end of the day, with the analogy I give is that having all of these millions of dollars of tools is like, having a dustpan. You're going on and you're sweeping up the dust. But if anyone's ever tried to sweep up, you always got a little bit that's left behind, no matter how
Right.
much you swept dust into the pan, which is you spending all the money on your security program. There's still a little bit, that little fine layer that you're always trying to sweep up and sweep a little by little. And if anyone's ever experienced trying to sweep up all the dust into a dustpan,
Right. Yeah.
there's always that something left behind, and that something left behind is people. There, you can
Yeah.
spend, hundreds of millions of dollars if you have the budget for it. But even someone like
Hmm.
when we say MGM Casino, one of the more profitable businesses on the planet, that when we think of like top level security, only films like Ocean's 11 ever can knock off a casino, right? And that's like a team of 11 guys with all these specialties doing
Yeah.
all these things in tandem and coordination and perfect flawless execution just to be able to do a heist. For a digital heist, obviously we would think the bar is super high with the top security of a casino. And again, it just took basic social engineering, which people often forget about. And that's how kind of hacking really got started. And so one of the
Yep.
godfathers of hackers that, when I talk about the gentleman, he's gone too soon, but Kevin Mitnick was the godfather of
Hmm.
hackers. And he started off with, social engineering corporations and just with a phone call, gaining someone's trust using those basic concepts to get people to give information, privileged information that they normally wouldn't. And so he actually started off as a hacker, but then actually the negative side of hacking, if you will. But he ended up
Right.
being an important person in Know Before. And you got almost a decade in with Know Before, so you must have some Kevin Mitnick stories. Is there any stories that you could share with us?
Yeah, so I'll share a story, but I want to flash back for just a second
Mhm.
and tag one thing onto the whole human layer discussion because I think it's important for us to realize, as cybersecurity people, we really like technology. We see technology as like the savior in a lot of ways, and we also typically impugn humans and call humans stupid or lazy or everything else very, very easily. I think we're
Yeah.
starting to realize that there's maybe not that dichotomy that we think about. But traditionally, what happens whenever there's a big breach, whether that's MGM or something else, or somebody clicked on a phishing link, what people do then is they go, well, did that company have security awareness? And always there's some level of security awareness at every company.
Hmm.
And so inevitably the answer is yes. And then what we technologists like to do then, and I see this over and over and over again, is that people will then say, well, obviously then security awareness doesn't work and it has no value, so we should just double down on technology. And my response to that is, number one, that's a stupid way of looking at it, because when you think about it, every layer of your technology got bypassed. And if the human clicking on the link or doing the thing is the thing that caused the breach, well, then what that showed is the weaknesses in all those other layers of technology. But you're not throwing out your firewall and saying that sucks. You're not throwing out your secure email gateway and saying that sucks. You're not throwing out your endpoint protection platform, application sandboxing, network segmentation, and everything else. So why then would you look at a human and say, well, because that human failed, they're worthless? Nobody does that with all the technology. So the only thing that I would argue for is that we treat the human layer with the same level of respect and benefit of the doubt as we do all the other technology-based layers, and we continue to invest in them in
Like
them
that.
because everything has the chance to get bypassed at some level. All
Love
right,
that.
so now we can talk about Kevin. Kevin came to Know before I did. So the founder of Know Before was Stu Showerman. And a couple years into Know Before, he had the chance to meet Kevin Mitnick, and they really hit it off. And one of the things that Stu really wanted to bring in was a real hacker's perspective. And because they hit it off so well, and because Kevin was really interested in helping people defend themselves, helping companies defend themselves from the types of attacker that Kevin used to be. He really threw himself into it and wanted to make a difference for the world. And I think that that's a thing that a lot of people miss with Kevin is like Kevin was on a mission to protect organizations from people like the person that Kevin used to be. And he really believed in the strength of a prepared human. And Kevin went on to do, he had his own company called Mitnick Security as well, and he would do red teaming, pen testing, social engineering, and the whole gamut. And his best days were when he would try to get into a company, he'd find out that they were a know before customer, and then somebody would catch them out and go, wait, this doesn't sound right. This doesn't feel right. And they would pause just long enough, or they'd ask a critical question and stop the red team in their tracks for that path. And so he was like, a proud person whenever that kind of thing happened. And so that was really good to see. Kevin definitely had a side that he showed to the people that knew him that he didn't show in public a lot. He was known for being kind of on stage, at least, he was known for being kind of or perceived to be kind of uppity or a know-it-all. A lot of that was a mask that he put on
Mhm.
because he knew that he needed to project a certain level of competence and confidence from the stage. But when you really got to know him, he was a very kind person that was very interested in helping others, definitely at a human level, also at a corporate level, and then trying to change the world as much as he could. But I'll tell you about the time I first like really met Kevin. I'd met Kevin several times in my career before Know Before, but the one where we spent the most time together was when I was a Gartner analyst and I was covering Know Before in the market that I was writing a Magic Quadrant for, and I was doing what's called a SAS session, which is a security advisory session with Know Before that day. So it's like an 8 hour session. I get into Clearwater, go into the office, sit down in this conference room. And at the end of this big long conference table is Kevin Mitnick. He's just there with his laptop open, just kind of working, not saying anything to anybody. And then Stu, the CEO, says, would you like to hook up to our Wi-Fi? Here's the information. And I was at that point, I looked at the table, I looked at Kevin, And I just thought, there's no way I'm attaching to this Wi-Fi. And I literally I said that to the room. It's like, there's no way I'm attaching to this Wi-Fi. Kevin Mitnick is right there. And so that was and I think that broke the ice really well. Kevin and I did a lot of talk whenever we would meet and just kind of blow off steam around conferences and stuff. We did a lot of talk about magic. Kevin was a magic fanatic as well. We would show each other tricks or talk about the different magicians that we had met and compare notes on who we liked and who we didn't, and the way that they framed their shows and all of that. But fantastic guy.
Speaking of magicians, what are your favorite magicians? Or I'm sorry, who are the more appropriately?
Yeah. So most of mine are fairly underground folks that
Okay.
maybe only other magicians really know. One of the ones that I think a lot of folks know, especially if you're in the UK, would be Darren Brown.
Okay.
He's a mentalist out
Mentalist.
of the UK. Does a lot of the type of stuff that I do whenever I weave mentalism into the keynotes that I do, which I'm going to start doing more pretty soon of that. I kind of dropped a lot of the mentalism around COVID because it works better in a room than it does over Zoom. Um, but uh, but yeah, Darren Brown is great. He's a fantastic showman. So like his scripting and his audience management are amazing, and the way that he's able to communicate like the broader message that he's trying to communicate through the medium of magic and mentalism is like second to none. Outside of that, the folks that I really like are more magicians that do magic for for other magicians. So somebody like Peter Turner, out of Las Vegas, there's a guy named Paul V. Hill that does some really good work. There's a really good show in Vegas that's a really small show, maybe 30 people can go at a time. It's called Ghost Stories. It's at the Prohibition Bar, and the guy that runs that, his name is Kent Axel. And it's kind of this it's all mentalism and theater, but it's very, very dark and like seance like. There's a lighthearted tone all the way through it,
Hmm.
but it's really interesting to see how he works and does his scripting and his entire production using these things that can be very lighthearted tricks, but they all have this very dark tone the way that he presents them, and I think he's a master at that.
Excellent. So, one of the things that I want to talk about is you're also a podcast host, and
Yeah.
so let's talk a little bit about the podcast and some of the guests that you've had and topics that you cover.
Yeah. So I've done a few different podcasts. There's three of them that I've done in the past, and I'm kind of bouncing between some of them now, trying to figure out like what I want the future to be like. The first one I started was called Eighth Layer Insights, and it was a highly produced security, human side of security podcast that was more like a magazine than a podcast, so an audio magazine. Lots of background music and sound effects and skits, voice acting and everything else. And then many times on it, there were 3 to 4 guests per episode as we talked about a specific topic, and then all their different quotes kind of pulled out and placed around a narrative structure. That was a lot of work to produce, and
Yeah, I was about to
so
say that sounds like
yeah.
a heavy lift on the production wise. Yeah.
Yeah, that was a heavy lift. So I started to move away from that and have then worked to single guest episodes, very similar to this, um, with that show. And I'm going to be returning back to that one pretty soon. There's another podcast that followed my book, Fake, and it's called The Fake Files, and it's all around deception and AI and kind of this new stage of reality that we're in. That's another show that's kind of in flux right now because I think we got complacent with it. We got to where that was more just news of the week type stuff, and then every now and then some interviews. So we're doubling down on that, and we're only going to do as hard hitting of interviews as we can get. So we're not going to do an interview just to fill a week.
Hmm.
And we're not going to do news stories just to fill time either. So it's going to be the most hard-hitting interviews we can get, and or some experimentation with new technologies or new techniques. So if there's like a new jailbreak that's out there, we might show that in action, how agentic AI is getting hacked and what the outputs of that are, or maybe testing a new deepfake product. So those kinds of experiments are going to be in that. And then another one that I run that has been quiet for the past year and a half, I think, is one called Digital Folklore. And it's all about urban legends and conspiracy theories and, things like the online equivalents of creepy clowns and
Hmm.
Slender Man and
Slender Man.
internet culture and memes and all of that. And we did 2 seasons of that. That actually for a short time got to be like number 12 out of all podcasts in the world on Apple Podcasts. And but that was again a really, really difficult production lift because essentially it was all sound designed, all scripted, and it was a fictional narrative that had real interviews in it. So it was like me and my co-host were actually fictional characters. There were other fictional characters like this talking raccoon that was there. There was a pawn shop owner that was some kind of demon type of presence that would come in and do weird stuff. And then we interviewed all these like real academic folklorists as part of that world. Um, that got to be a pretty heavy lift. And what we also saw is that some people really appreciated the narrative. Some people wish that we had just cut to the interviews. And so we're revisiting that one now too, and are going to try to come up with a best of all worlds approach for that one because
The
that
folklore
um,
podcast sounds like something like a show I'd see on like Discovery Channel or even a
exactly,
limited docu-series, if you will, because you
yeah,
covered all of these internet folklore stories. I
yep,
like that. That's a pretty
yeah.
good concept there.
We
Um,
were really hoping that like somebody from Netflix or Amazon Prime would listen to that show and say, "Hey, we want to turn that into a series." But
I think it would make a
either
fantastic
the
series, considering the topic. So you mentioned
yep,
in there the one of the podcasts, Fake, which your book
yeah,
is titled. I'm gonna spell it for everyone. Faik. So I
yes,
love the spin of the deep fake focus on AI, and then you coming up with the word because when you first see it, you want to assume it's an acronym, but the AI in the
right.
middle, it's very clever. Fake. So let's talk about the book Fake. It's got a longer title, so if you wouldn't mind
Hmm.
giving us the whole title and telling us the why behind that book.
Sure. Yeah. So the title is Fake, Faik, and then the subtitle is A Practical Guide for Living in a World of Deep Fakes, Disinformation, and AI Generated Deception. I wrote that starting mid 2024, released it October 2024. So it's a really, really
Wow.
compressed writing time frame. Um, and I also wrote it with the idea of even though it's about AI, which 2024 AI is different than today's AI because we've improved so much.
Oh, yes.
Um, but I could see the trajectory, and I also didn't want to write a book that would be out of date the day that it was put on the shelf. And I think I accomplished that. So the way I approached it is I wrote it in three basic sections or three basic themes. Section one, which is roughly chapters 1 through 3, was kind of how we got to where we are with AI. So if you're an AI novice and you read that, by the end of chapter 3, you will be literate and conversant in AI in ways that will not get you in trouble or have people laugh at you that know what they're talking about.
Mm,
Because I see a lot of people who are trying to catch up and they might misuse terms. They might not know what a large language model is or a small language model. They might not understand mixed modalities, all of that kind of stuff. So you get very conversant in that, and I think a fun way. Then the middle section of the book is all about the history and fundamentals of deception. So all the stuff we talked about with magic and misdirection and all of that. And I want to grow people who are deceptionologists, essentially. But then to be able to tie all those age-old principles to the opportunities that hackers and scammers and con artists have given the new tool set of AI. So there's a lot of munging of those age-old concepts with current technology there, and then forecasting what's going to be possible in the future. And then the last third is defensive measures, things that you, your family, your organization can or should do to protect yourselves.
Excellent. I love that whole the old and traditional concepts meeting the new technology. I
Yeah.
released a book a couple years ago now called The Art of War and Cybersecurity, where I take Sun
Mm,
Tzu's Art of
that's
War
right.
philosophies and strategies and apply it to today's cyber landscape. So I love that how some of these tried and tested traditional information still applies today. Because history repeats itself, right? That's a very
Yep.
common thing. And with history always repeating itself, we to err as human, to really follow things up requires a computer, right? Um,
Right.
so the one of the things I want to also talk about is just that topic right there, deepfakes and generative AI. I mean, a lot of folks. I mean, you just mentioned just in the past, we can even just say in the past 30 days, there's just been so many exponential jumps, right? There's always a new
Hmm.
AI model or a new company coming out with another LLM or model that is doing this now great or doing this. I could just remember maybe just a year plus ago, people were talking about like the image generative AIs having
Right.
problems with bodies and fingers and so forth. That's non-existent now because now we have full motion video. There, like just recently they had a video clip of like Brad Pitt and Tom Cruise having a fight
Yep.
on a rooftop, and people are being blown away at the quality. And now we've got issues to where I've been talking about as an author, I'm concerned over intellectual property and copyright, right? That's a big issue.
Yeah.
Where a couple years ago, I think it's been about 2 years now, there was a court case brought up about this, and the judge did not rule against the AI systems. And so that really made people
Yeah.
start to, at least people that are authors and content creators, could go, wait a minute, so you're going to allow the ingestion of all these works and protected works under copyright by these models that can reuse them within generating new information or regenerating content that was already protected under copyright. So with that being said, talking about Gen AI and talking about deepfakes, we're in a world now that where, at any moment people could make a deepfake of you doing a new
Hmm.
podcast. That's now possible with full motion video and the
Yeah.
ability to mimic voices, because that's another thing that's been happening on the internet. You can have Elvis singing, a modern pop song or Johnny Cash, and
Hmm.
all of these mix-ups are happening now, which there's some novelty in it. Now, I'm not going to deny the
Right.
novelty because, the idea that we could potentially have a new Elvis album come out if that estate chose to leverage an AI system to
Right.
mimic. And artists are, we see different artists making choices, and you see it in the news from time to time where this artist has now, agreed to have his likeness used by his estate in perpetuity. Like I think Michael Caine is on that list, but then some
Hmm.
other actors have said absolutely not. So we're seeing people making, their own positions and trying to control their likeness and image for one way or the other. But what is your perspective since you've been really in this space and monitoring and seeing all this landscape shifting? What has been your perspective so far in the world of deepfakes and Gen AI?
Yeah. So it's I think there's a broad perspective that we have to take, which is we're very quickly entering a world, and we're probably already there for a lot of us, where there's no reliable way to tell what's real and what's not. There are times right now when I, as somebody that sees deepfakes all day, and can generally intuitively tell what's real and not based on some of the patterns that you kind of just ingest, as you're seeing content from different platforms like VO3 or Sora 2 or some of the Kling stuff. You can kind of tell by the cadence of the way that some of them speak, or there's almost like a carrier tone, like a readiness within a VO3 speech, or on Sora 2, there's like a crunchiness to the speech, and there's some definite um, patterns of speech that they tend to replicate as far as the way that they utter phrases and the timing behind that. Um, but when you get away from that, and even within those platforms, every now and then something just takes you by surprise. And for a second, if let's say you generate something on Sora 2 that's really good, and then you put it on TikTok or you put it on Facebook, and then it's in context with other stuff that you don't know is fake. Every now and then, given kind of where your mind is or what's going on in the world, or just as you're scrolling through, even an expert needs to do a double or triple take sometimes. Um, so I know for sure that if I every now and then am having to go, huh, I'm gonna have to look at that a few times to know what's up with it, then the vast majority of the population has no idea what's real or what's not. And that's a scary place to be. The other scary
Yeah.
place to be is that as I've looked at the technology for deep fake detection, it's been a few months since I've done the deep dive in this, so the technology certainly improved. But when I did a deep dive testing deep fake detectors several months ago, I broke all of them that I wanted to break. Like every time I wanted to create a deep fake and bypass detection, I was able to do it, whether that was sound, whether that was video, whether that was images, or so on. And then conversely, a lot of them made mistakes and would tag real video footage or audio that I uploaded as potentially fake. So for me, when I was looking at it, it was like a coin toss at best at whether the deepfake detection platforms worked. And so I really adopted the perspective, and I put this in the book too, is that we're in a world right now where everything is going to have AI influence over it,
Hmm.
even real quote unquote real things. Because like we got on this Zoom call, each of us has the ability to click that little magic button that says touch up my appearance or
Hmm.
blur my background. All of that
Right.
is AI influence over that. So AI is touching and putting its happy little fingers all over the frames of our videos, even when they're quote unquote real. And if I wanted to go to any image or video generation platform, I can prompt in such a way that I can make a person look more real than you or I look. Because I can choose to expose like skin defects and, have the pores be a little bit more prominent or things like that, where they don't look as touched up. And then now all of a sudden, you're in this space where you and I are a little bit fake looking on Instagram or TikTok because we're using filters to make ourselves look better. And then somebody smacks you with a person that looks, just like they might look in real life because you see all the other defects, but
Imperfections.
that
Yeah.
person is wholly AI generated.
Wow. Wow. I mean, again, I think what I just said about the fingers and the body,
Yeah,
the body being deformed and so forth. And just like you mentioned with the voices, I think in another 3, 6 months they're going to fix that, and it's going to be constantly improving, right? And so,
right.
we used to say with technology, well, in the next 2 to 5 years, now it's like in the next 2 to 3 months, right? What is the next
Exactly.
level? And I think it's getting scarier and scarier. And you mentioned authentication, right? How do we come up
Yeah.
with the systems to truly help us authenticate and discern what's real and what's fake? And it's going to get almost near impossible. And so I think
Yeah.
this is going to come back to that human element, training people to look for the small telltale signs. But I think the only technology that I've seen recently that I thought really had a chance to be that authentication factor for people, and of course it quickly went the wrong direction. So as soon as I say this, people are going to come up in
Mm,
arms and say, "Oh no, that's
okay.
a scam." And if non-fungible tokens, because I believe that the
Uh,
goal of that was to be for authentication, for digital authentication.
hmm.
And so I'll go a little bit further to kind of explain my point. Obviously, the digital art gold rush happened with it, and a lot of scams. A lot of people got rug pulled and etc. with that, so it's kind of dead on arrival. But what we're hearing today with stocks and with other real world assets, there's a lot of folks using the word tokenization. And make no
Hmm.
mistake, folks, tokenization is just another rebrand, a generic rebranding of NFTs, non-fungible tokens. At the end of the day, it is something that's on a blockchain ledger just to prove authenticity. It's the equivalent of when you went into like a sports memorabilia shop and you're buying a baseball signed by some player or football or a jersey. You usually get a certificate of authentication. It's a piece of paper where someone's vouching for the authentication of that this thing is real.
Yep.
And to me, that's kind of a future when they talk about tokenization of assets and stocks and so forth. That's very powerful stuff when we're having that. But to the everyday person, I'm thinking that they can tokenize like concert experience, like Ticketmaster should tokenize your ticket to where, as social media gets more into this, trying to determine, well, what's real and what's fake. Some people can go out and say, oh, I was at the last Prince concert, and people be like, no, that's
Yeah.
BS. You can say, well, here it is. Here's my social media profile's got the badge or whatever, the representative of that token of that concert that proves that I was there, right? Same thing with like the
Hmm.
shoe industry, right? There's a lot of kids now the sneaker industry is just crazy right now where pop-up stores and so forth. And they're trained, their employees and people that trade in shoes are really trained well to pick out counterfeits, right? So to kind of
Yeah.
defeat the counterfeit industry when you're trading a shoe that's like the latest LeBron or Michael Jordan, the Jordan or whatever famous basketball player shoes, that each shoe would come with its own token for authenticity, and then you would just trade that along with the product. I do believe that tokenization will be that future level of authentication, and it's just a shame that NFTs got its bad rap because of the gold rush of trying to sell digital art, which again that happens sometimes with different
Right.
technologies. But I'm looking
Yeah.
forward to seeing tokenization, how it manifests itself with like the stock market. That's going to be interesting to see that
Hmm.
migration. But I would love to see it, come into every aspect of our lives, just like when we go get a title for our vehicle or title, go into a title company for your house, that those systems would also be as, archaic and, taking schedules and days to do and so many hoops to go through, that tokenization would streamline a lot of those processes as well. So I
Yeah.
think it will be
Well,
helpful to human society, but at the same time, giving us that level of, like you said, being able to know what's real and what's not.
right. Well, there's kind of a toe in the water for something like that right now. And you may have seen this like on LinkedIn or some other social media platforms where if there's a um, if there is an image that has been created in something like ChatGPT and then uploaded without modification, so it's not been laundered in any way, is what I'm getting at. Because you can launder things and pull metadata out and obscure the fact that it was created all day long. But right now there is a coalition. It's called the Coalition for Content Provenance and Authenticity. And a lot of the major companies like Google and Apple and Meta and all that are part of this coalition. It's just called C2PA. And what that does is put a content credential that's embedded in the metadata of the image and maybe a little bit more than that. And it also has the option to basically register that on a blockchain somewhere as well. And so where that works is with things that you want to verify the provenance of. So that could be built into certain things that are meant to produce real media. So like if you're running a Sony video camera, you could have the C2PA protocol built into everything that it's encoding within the tape. And so it knows that it was at this camera at this time, assuming all time and date and all that other stuff was said correctly. But camera, time, date, if there's geolocation, all of that could be tagged in it, put in the blockchain, and then that this camera that was owned by this company or this person produced this video at this time and then was uploaded. And so that can start to show provenance of real things. And at the same time, if you're creating imagery on ChatGPT or some of the others that have signed on to this, it's injecting metadata, C2PA credential saying that this was created using ChatGPT at this time, this day by this person. So that gets there. The thing with these is it only works with people that want to play ball. So not everything is going to have C2PA or the equivalent built in. And so you might end up with a Chinese model or an open source model that's not interested in that. Or you might create something using a tool that has C2PA that let's say so Google has something called Synth ID built in, but let's say C2PA is also there. I'm not sure if it is or not. But let's say that's there and I want to obscure that. I don't want that traced back to VO3. Well, if I do a screen recording or if I do a screenshot of an image on that, then I've essentially laundered that out because the metadata has been taken out at that point. Or if I've got it on one screen and I've got a high enough resolution screen, and then I use my cell phone video camera and just video that, well, then that's not going to be there unless there's embedded watermarks within the frames that could be picked up on another video. So they're having to solve for all of that kind of stuff, and it's going to be a very difficult few years until we get to something that's sustainable.
It's very similar to steganography, right? It's kind of like the
Exactly.
concepts of steganography being used now for good, right? Where steganography was
Yep.
used to hide information and pass information along. Now it's actually being, the concept of it is being, again, the traditional and older stuff coming back again to
Yep.
help us with newer challenges and problems. I love that. We could talk for hours and hours, Perry, about all these different things, but I do want to be respectful of your time, and I have some of my agenda questions I'd like to get to. So first off the
Sure.
gate, one of my favorite questions I like to ask all my guests is their day one story. So I kind of, you mentioned magic earlier, but is there a
Yeah.
story around the first day you said, I want to go into cybersecurity and IT and do all this, the work that you've done now in your career? Is there a story around your day one that you could share with us?
Um, So I get maybe a feeling about my day one. So I was when it comes to security, I was always interested in all the spy stuff. So I think that that was it. It's like, the spy allure. And that's also the thing that drew me to the human side of things is because I'd been at large companies and I'd seen people and had on my own also spent hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars on technology only to see the fact that uh, a really motivated attacker or an unprepared human would lead to a very bad day. And so that got me really, really interested in saying, all right, I've understood all this deception stuff. Now let me add on some additional layers of understanding the way that the human mind works. In general with psychology, the way that behavioral economics work, and so on. And let me really throw myself at trying to understand how we tackle this human side of the security stack. So it's less of a day one story and more of a like, how everything before I got into the human side of things prepared me to make that pivot. And I was a hardcore programmer earlier in my career, and also just realized that yeah, I was good at that at the time, but my passion really lies in trying to understand like why people do the things that they do and think the things that they think and how that can be exploited.
Wow. It's almost like in another life you would have been a great spy yourself, working maybe clandestine services, right? And speaking of
That'd
which,
be
I think
fun.
that's probably a really good target customer group for a lot of the training and your expertise would be really good for in that field, helping them be better
Yeah.
clandestine agents, actually. So I don't know if that's part of your customer portfolio, but that might be something to consider. Next question is along your journey so far, there've had to been some really positive and influential people along the way of your journey, whether managers, colleagues, coworkers, or even just people in industry that you admired and looked up
Hmm.
to. So the goal of this question is kind of shine a light on those names that have had a positive impact along your career and journey so far.
Yeah, so some of these people I've not been in touch with in a long time, and a couple of them may not even be on this planet anymore. Like early in my career, a guy that really invested a lot in me and had faith in me is a guy named George Brooks over at JB Hunt that really brought me in, paid me more than I was worth at the time because he could see like what my potential was. Over at Walmart, when I started there, a guy named David Newton, very, very similar, had a lot of faith in a young guy that still had a ton to learn. But he saw something there and really allowed me to mold that. And I think just had a ton of faith in what I could do. Over at Gartner, when I was there, guy named Ray Wagner was an amazing boss and mentor. Um, Somebody I had as a boss twice in two different companies is a guy named Greg Schaefer. He's at Walmart now. He's an amazing legal mind and cybersecurity mind. And he was the CISO at Alltel when I went to work at Alltel before they were bought by Verizon. Again, really had a lot of faith in me and mentored me well. And then he also brought me into Fidelity Information Services after they had their breach. He got hired as CISO after their big breach in 2011 and pulled together a team of people really to kind of put the ship back right. And we did some great work there. And then, of course, in my most recent years, Stu Showerman, founder and CEO for KnowBe4, Kevin Mitnick, of course, a person who I've spent a lot of time with and really enjoyed soaking up all the perspective that they had to share. Um, and gosh, I know that I've skipped a few folks, and if you're listening and feel like I've skipped you, it's only because I was put on the spot.
It's like that
But
Oscar
yeah, thanks for
acceptance
the
speech.
chance to
There's not
share.
enough
Yeah,
time, and there's so many people. But
exactly.
it's amazing how people have such an impact on our lives, right? And it takes
Oh
people
yeah.
to recognize the capacity of others and to give people the opportunities to so that they can grow and also learn from mentors and great
Hmm.
managers and leaders. So thank you for paying homage to
Yeah.
some of the great people who have had an impact on your life.
Thank
I
you.
like to do a quick break from all the tech talk. This is called my moment of levity, where I shoot a couple quick fire, rapid fire questions. Whatever first answer comes to
Sure.
your mind. There's no right or wrong answer. This is just for fun, a
Okay.
moment of fun. So
Sure.
I'm gonna come hot out the gate because this splits every IT group right here. Star Wars
Oh
or
no.
Star Trek?
Oh geez. Star Wars.
Which trilogy of Star Wars are you the biggest fan of?
Still the first. The original
Original.
1970s. Yeah.
Awesome. What is your favorite character of that trilogy?
Oh man. I'd pivot around. I mean, Darth Vader just because it's Darth Vader, but
Darth Vader.
then also Chewbacca and Yoda for
Hell yeah.
various reasons. But
I mean,
yeah,
Darth Vader's so cool. He's got his own theme music, right? So,
exactly.
um, is a hot dog a sandwich?
Hot dog is a taco.
I like that's the most unique answer I've had so far. Uh, oh goodness, you threw me for a loop. Cake or pie? Staying on food.
Cake,
What kind of cake?
chocolate.
Chocolate cake. Hot or cold chocolate cake?
Uh, I'm gonna go with cold.
Cold chocolate cake. Okay. What has been your most favorite book you've ever read of all time, and what was the last book you've read?
Oh man. Favorite book of all time. It was trying to remember if this was solo written or joint written. There's a book called Neverwhere by Neil Gaiman, and I believe Terry Pratchett co-wrote it. Now I realize Neil Gaiman has had problems exposed recently, so I'm not yeah, necessarily propping him up, but I loved that book at the time.
You know, it's interesting you mentioned that, and again, with sensitivity to today's, landscape and climate in regards to individual responsibility and action versus art. And I've often,
Yeah,
not to get into a heavy discussion on that, but it's like Kevin Spacey, for example. There was a time where,
yeah.
he, in the court of public opinion, he was basically found guilty, and everybody kind of turned their backs on him. Now, since he has went through multiple cases of litigation and won a lot of those cases through, and of course
Hmm.
his story is very well known now. He's been on social media and so forth, literally crying about moving and selling his houses and kind of living in near squalor.
Yeah.
But one of the things that I always like to say, as an author myself, there's the individual and then there's the art. And the problem is our society has them intertwined, right? It's kind of like as an
Yeah.
author, your name is usually as big as the title in a book. And I'll give it a great example, like Stephen King, right? Stephen
Hmm.
King's written a lot of great, there's so many films right now that are timeless classics that are based on Stephen King novels. But if Stephen King
Yeah.
was to end up coming out as the world's most horrible person, do you now downplay the art? And then that art medium not only includes the books but then the films, and you got to think of the films as the
Right.
actors, the
Yeah.
cast and the
Exactly.
production crew around the work that put in to create that new form of that media. So it's like Michael Jackson. The court of public opinion was kind of 50-50, right? Some people believe that he was a pedophile, some people believe that he wasn't. But at some point, when do you separate the artist and the art to where you can appreciate the
Hmm.
art, not necessarily supporting the actions? Because it's that old saying, you could build 1,000 bridges, But you fool around with one
Right.
goat, you're now just the goat guy. You're not the bridge builder. And that's the difference of, I guess, reputation and character. But
Yeah.
to me, I always try, to be at least sensible enough to separate the art and the artist. Because even if, let's
Yeah.
say, Michael Jackson, we 100% knew he was a bad person, can we still appreciate his music and art and separate that as a
Hmm.
society? And unfortunately, as a society, we obviously can't. But again, I don't want to go off on that tangent of a
Yeah.
commentary because it is a landmine of itself. But I do find that to
Yeah.
be an interesting discussion for people to
It is
have.
it is interesting. I'll chime in on one part of it. So, in general, I agree. Like, I think you look at art for the sake of art, and you say this is a really interesting or valuable expression. The thing that has happened mostly kind of in the past few decades for us because of social media and the ability for everybody to have their own platform is the voice of the artist outside of the art starts to become this thing that people want to listen to. And the specifically one of the problems with Neil Gaiman, and there's probably others like this, is that they then become known for being like an advocate for certain people groups or expressing certain opinions.
Mhm.
And then the fear when they get exposed for something that seems counter to that is like, was that all a sham? Was it a front? Were they playing to the camera or for public opinion for whatever other reason? And I think that merging between like the voice of the author outside of the art and then the art that should stand on its own has become muddled in the social media world that we live in right now.
Yeah, cancel culture is still very
Yep.
toxic and powerful. And obviously, when someone is wrong, obviously let the law and due process happen. But I think the court
Yeah.
of public opinion is very harsh, where everybody's supposed to have their day in court. And but in social media court, it is very brutal. Um,
Hmm.
so for anyone watching right now, any of the books and things that so far that's been talked about, we're going to save you that Google search so you don't have to just pause the links.
Appreciate it.
Peter will make sure to get me all the book links and the links to his book, Fake, and his podcast. We'll get all those links down in the description below. So we're going to save you that Google search. Peter, I know we're running down on time, but I want to get a couple more questions in. One of them is, being a deceptionologist, and getting that education and that knowledge where you can spot deep fakes and so forth. If someone's watching this right now, going, "Hey, how do I get, Peter's level 99. He's at the top of the game and at the top of the mountain, but I just want to get to like level 10." What are some resources?
Yeah.
Whether do you have some sites, blog posts, or even on your podcast? What are some resources that someone watching right now says, "Hey, I want to get smart on being able to detect deep fakes and
Right.
learn more about the work that and being a deceptionologist. How can I get educated here?"
So one of the things that I'll mention is, and you could do this without spending any money, is check out my channel, the Fake Files online. So you can just look at that on YouTube. With the book Fake, you can go to thisbookisfake.com /resources, and I've got a whole bunch of free resources there as well. If you want to spend money, then kind of the sky's the limit. I do some training programs. I don't have one on the schedule now for deep fakes, but we just finished one. Myself and a guy named Cameron Malin, who was one of the folks that started the FBI Cyber Deception Analysis Unit, which is kind of the equivalent of the Behavioral Analysis Unit, the Behavioral Profiling Unit for the FBI. Cameron Malin and I do a 5-day course on deepfake creation and detection and all the psychology behind that, around that and narrative attacks. Um, Brian Brushwood and I are starting to do some stuff. Brian Brushwood's the founder of Scam School and the Modern Rogue. And we're starting to do more and more things together as well. Like an example, coming up here in early March, I think March 2nd in Clearwater, we're doing a 1-day thing on scam psychology, and we're going to blend magic and mentalism and deep fakes and all that together. Um, and then if you want to hit me up and ask about books or anything else, I'm happy to kind of learn what would be most interesting to people to hear about. and then recommend some books or resources based on that I may have created or anybody out there may have created. So happy to be a referral point for that. And you can just look me up on LinkedIn. Just go search Perry Carpenter, and you'll be able to find me. Or do a Google search, and you'll probably see all the sites that I've got out there.
And we'll also have those links to his LinkedIn in the description below. Perry, a lot of us have busy, demanding day jobs, but we do find time to give, whether of our time, energy, or money, to causes, nonprofit,
Hmm.
volunteer work, charities, and organizations out there that are trying to make impactful change in the world. And so, the goal of this question is: there an organization that fits one of those boxes that you want to shine a light on, and talk a little bit about what they're
Mm,
doing, the good that they're doing in the world? Like, for example, for myself, I love supporting St. Jude's Cancer Research Hospital
right.
because obviously the children are our future, and they're doing tremendous work there, and every
Hmm.
dollar is well spent that's contributed to them. So, is there a nonprofit charity, volunteer organization that is doing some great work in the world that you want to shine a light on?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I kind of I don't do a ton of research into the nonprofits, so I'm always very steerable in where I give my my time or resources with nonprofits. And it kind of depends seasonally for me. Like, in one season, there may be an oppressed people group that I want to be able to give money to, and there's groups that are doing good work there. It might be legal funds that are helping people or people
Hmm.
groups. It might be medical research funds, like you mentioned, St. Jude's. But for me, I'm very sporadic around which ones I support at any given time, outside of some of the ones in my local community.
Okay. And for all my guests, and this wasn't on the agenda, folks, so this is truly putting
Yeah.
Peter on the spot here, is for all my, I'm sorry, Perry, I said Peter. That's a
Oh,
little
you're good.
Freudian slip. But for Perry here, I give all my guests the final word. Whether you want to talk about being a deceptionologist, cyber, or
Yeah.
any topic related to tech, or you can talk about your favorite color, favorite cuisine. It can be whatever you like to talk about.
Right.
This is the final word. It is yours.
Okay. So one thing I didn't get to is that I think every deep fake or deception or piece of disinformation, it's it has the thing that we see is just an artifact. If you see a deep fake in your social media feed, that is a little artifact. It's like a packaged MP4 file or an image or whatever. That artifact has very little power on its own. The thing that gives it power is the context or the story that it's dropped into. So every deepfake attack, every scam is actually a narrative attack, and we have to understand that. So we have to understand the narrative, we have to understand the emotion that's being exploited, and then we have to ask questions around who would send this, who would create this, who would send this out, what are they hoping to gain, what are they hoping that somebody does or believes because of that? And then also, look at the distribution methods and everything else. But every deep fake, every scam is, yeah, the only reason it has power is because of the story and the context that it's put into. And so the first way to start to dismantle it is to start asking critical questions about it.
Well said. Well, Perry, thank you so much for being on Top Cyber Pro
Thank
podcast. I
you.
really appreciate all your insights and perspectives. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you.